welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're talking about a very, let's say, dear topic of mine, because I've been, messing with it my whole life. So it was interesting to see, there's people that think about these types of topics in a different way than I do, and that always interests me, right?
Cool. Yeah.
But maybe we start there because, like, I got my diagnosis super early, so in kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
and you got it super late, I would say, in comparison.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the easier pill to swallow in that sense?
It's hard to say because I know even people that I work with who were diagnosed earlier, it's not that anything was really done about it, right? Especially, 30 years ago, for example. Maybe medication, but it's not like you were taught skills probably or much was done with it at that young age at that time.
Horse therapy. That's all I had.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, at least it's something. At least you know why something is up. For me, I always just felt like, I think differently than other people, but that's just me. I'm unique. And got through. And then when I had kids is really when it was like, oh, okay, something's different and up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just for me it was I just never fit in. It wasn't just that I was thinking differently. It was just always on the sidelines. I was always pushed outside, and like you're distracting. You're uncomfortable. You're asking wrong questions, especially in school. So that was kind of my journey back then.
Yeah. As and the men and women thing is different as well, and girls and boys, because I didn't necessarily have that experience. Well, I was on the sidelines, but for other reasons. I was just chubby and a nerd. It had nothing to do with my brain. But yeah, like high school, when I lost weight and then people liked me, I was able to fit in because I do think girls can be better at masking and kind of fitting into the mold, but not that it's authentic or enjoyable or relaxing.
Mm-hmm. And then you basically started thinking about food and these issues attached to that. That was like your first nerdy path, right?
Well, it wasn't nerdy. It was very disordered and superficial and very dysregulated, which is now I know that ADHD and eating disorders and disordered eating can be so intertwined because of that dysregulation, being in fight or flight, all or nothing thinking. And I went down that path for a decade. And then when I repaired my relationship with food and realized, oh, wow, I was thinking that way, and now I'm more flexible in my thinking, that journey definitely informed my work with ADHD as well, and give me a unique perspective that I think not everyone has because of that.
Yeah. How was it with you with thought processes? Because like clearly you can go deep on topics. I mean, me as well, but usually like it is said that we can kind of focus on stuff that we're really interested in. But like for me, I don't think that's even true. Like sometimes it's just impossible for me to like go deep on stuff and like stick to it. And like what's your take on that? Because clearly the narrative is one way and reality is a bit different. Like to me at least.
Yes. Well, if we're in fight or flight, it's different than if we're regulated, which is my whole thing with ADHD. So like when I did do that stuff with my food relationship and relationship with body image and everything, I did become very interested in that. And then I did that for work for 7 years. So I was able to stick to it. But within that, I was always doing different new things. Like, I'll do this kind of course. I'll launch this. I'll work with groups. I'll do this. So I did see that kind of scatteredness within doing the same work for 7 years. But then when I switched over to working with ADHDers and when I became a therapist and then learned about regulation, now I see it as like, oh, I've been building one thing for 2 years and I haven't been scattered and jumping around from thing to thing because I'm out of fight or flight and more regulated. So that definitely is a factor.
Yeah, it's a big thing. The adrenal glands, like I definitely text them a lot. Like for me, it was a lot of addiction in my 20s. Yeah, that was my path,
Yeah.
self-medication basically.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really touch any Adderall or Ritalin up until like it was 2021, I think, when I got it
Mm-hmm.
myself for university.
Mm.
Because I just like third year of bachelor's, I think, was when I kind of reached my limit. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I like let's try something, right? And
Cool.
didn't really like it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, it's
then
not for everybody.
yeah, and then found cocaine a couple years. Like during that phase, I found it,
Mm-hmm.
but I went to Colombia and I stayed there, and then I found like, okay, if you have the real
Mm.
stuff, that shit actually works, and that
Mm-hmm.
and that was like, yeah, the change in everything back then, right? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
an addiction is that soothes being in fight or flight. That soothes dysregulation. So when we're dysregulated, that is, we'll go to substances, scrolling, spending, whatever people's thing is. And I think the current narrative is that's dopamine seeking, right? But as someone who sees the ADHD through the lens of being in fight or flight, and that's actually our problem, what it's doing is soothing the dysregulation. So I'm dysregulated, which is very uncomfortable, right? It's physically very uncomfortable and mentally
yeah.
very uncomfortable. And so when I use substances, when I spend, when I scroll, it numbs that, it softens that, so I'm more comfortable. And so seeing it that way, I think, is interesting as well, because if we get regulated, the desire for that will be less.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for me it was that the issue with alcohol, right? Because like I
Mm.
couldn't even sit still properly and meditate until I laid that off. That was kind of the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Once I laid off the alcohol, I was able to go inward and spend time with
Cool.
myself, and then everything changed, right? But that was kind of the difference. So yeah, but let's talk about fight or flight a bit more. Like
Mm-hmm.
why do you think that the narrative is different from your experience with that?
I don't think we factored in the reality, which I perceive that every single person with ADHD is in fight or flight unless we've actively worked on it. And my reasoning for that is we have a different brain and we're born into a world where we assume brains are typical until proven otherwise. So you're raised, especially if you're diagnosed later, raised assuming what's wrong with you. Like you have a normal brain, but you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so all of those little instances of getting in trouble, fear of forgetting, being frustrated with yourself, having to do things last minute, those little instances put us into fight or flight the same way as one big traumatic event would. So every ADHDer has probably experienced that to some level. So it triggers us into fight or flight, and then we're hyper vigilant. We're always worried about getting in trouble, and you're on edge and in that protection mode. And so then we get stuck there, right? If you're chronically in that state for so long, you do get stuck there. And now you might be going on vacation and you can't enjoy it. You're trying to relax and you can't sit still. Well, that is because we're in fight or flight. It's not because we inherently can't relax or have fun or enjoy. But when you're in fight or flight and stuck in it, which is just a state the body goes into when it thinks it's in danger, it's very biological. You're not controlling it, so it's no one's fault. But when we get into that place, yeah, we're going to get stuck there, and your body doesn't know if you're sitting on the beach on vacation or at work really stressed. So that's when we get into this, adulthood, and we go, oh my gosh, life's so hard. I can't enjoy anything. I can't relax. Or I'm just so frantic and intense, and then I crash and can't do anything, and I'm stuck in this cycle. And ADHD studies that have been done have not identified that we're dealing with two issues. We have it brain difference, but we're also in fight or flight. We have to see that it's two problems we're dealing with. We can work on this one, and then you're left with the brain difference that actually is a lot less taxing than we think it is. Because right now we're thinking the ADHD brain is dysregulation plus brain difference. And we're chalking that up to ADHD.
Mm.
And so the studies out there aren't really giving the full picture, because we're studying a brain saying, oh, this is ADHD and that's why you're having these problems. Let's try to help the problems, and not seeing that, oh, there's two layers to this issue.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I tried everything. I also tried like linguistic programming, like all these different types of approaches, and nothing really changed up
Mm-hmm.
until I actually worked on that fight or flight, situation, right? Let's say.
Cool.
And I mean, I you know, didn't understand it, but now you speaking about it makes total sense, right? Um, so you said probably a big majority had like a traumatic event at some point, fight or flight. Maybe it was a parent, maybe we're still in the belly. Like, do you think that's the case mostly, or
Yeah, but we
like,
don't
what's
have
your
to.
experience?
I don't identify as having any trauma in my life. Like I've had a very privileged life. I don't identify with that, so people might think no, but it's not big capital T trauma. It's just like the every day of your life feeling like I'm different. I have to keep up. Oh my gosh, why am I behind? Oh, I keep forgetting stuff, getting in trouble. It's just a life where you're kind of why are you so lazy, right? These little instances that maybe each one didn't bother you, but culminated, it kind of puts us on the defense and puts our system into that hypervigilance, that fight or flight, that defensive mode where it's like, oh my God, now I got to work so hard just to stay safe, right? It creates a feeling of we're not safe inside of us, like biologically, nervous system and subconscious and in our brain. Um, and then it tips us into fight or flight, and then we're stuck there, and then we just function in that place, even though there is not an imminent life-threatening danger present. And that's what fight or flight is supposed to be for, right? It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. There are instances when you need to fight for your life. We very rarely, luckily, knock on wood, are rarely in those instances, but yet we're in fight or flight all the time. And that's why life doesn't work. Because we're in fight or flight, but our daily life typically requires calm, presence, relaxing, like writing emails. Boop, ba-doop, ba-doop. Most of us have like thinking jobs, not physical labor jobs. We need our brains to be regulated and present and calm to do those jobs well. If we're in fight or flight and we need to do a task that requires logic and thinking and planning and calm energy, yeah, it's not gonna. We do not thrive. So that's why
Yeah, it
it's
doesn't
really
match.
important to realize that. Yeah.
Doesn't match. Yeah, but and then what about kids? Let's say when you're super young, like with 2 or 3, and it's already present.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I'm not a fan of identifying with labels anyways, like I never
Mm-hmm.
say, like to people I have ADHD. So when someone asks me, maybe I do, right? But like
Yeah.
I've never used that label in school. I never, I could have
Mm-hmm.
gotten like extra time, probably also
Mm-hmm.
dyslexia, all that kind of stuff. I never gave myself that label. Also with addiction now, like I think once you've worked through your addiction, you should never say you're a recovering addict, right? Or you count the days and all that kind of stuff, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of out there, right? I really don't support that. But how do you view that then when there's like these kids, that kind of get that diagnosis super early, and maybe the household it seems like it's regulated to the outside, but I assume
Mm-hmm.
there's probably 1 or 2 major events that kind of triggered it in a sense. I mean, you just said like there's these things lining up, right? Which could very well be the case, but like Gabo Mate talks about that too, right?
Yeah, I do
Like
not agree
these.
with his because he's saying, from my understanding, what he's saying is ADHD is not a real thing. It's just
Mhm.
trauma. I am not saying that. I am not
Okay.
saying that. I'm saying we have a brain difference,
Yes,
and because of that brain difference, it has triggered us into fight or flight.
I
But
understand.
we can work on the fight or flight piece, so we're left with this. Because as a very regulated person, this is what I talk about. This is what I think about. This is what I practice. For 2 years, I've been like obsessed with this and doing it myself. I still have working memory stuff that I know is, it's never going to go away. I need to cope with it, have accommodations, and help myself out. Attention to detail, I still find very challenging. And no matter how hard I try, it's still just a deficit I can see. So I am not here to say that ADHD isn't real and not a thing in and of itself. But what I'm saying is, if you have the ADHD diagnosis, we need to understand, oh, there's a second layer on top of that I could actually work on, and the remaining symptoms are going to be so manageable. Like I am thriving. I have those like some little symptoms here and there, but child's play compared to when I was dysregulated. Like it's not a problem. The benefits of my ADHD brain far outweigh the struggles I have. And I see that too. I see the benefits of my thinking, the unique way I think, which has created this whole way that I work with people. If I didn't have ADHD, I would never have made these connections and seen how important this is. So I'm not agreeing with him that this is just trauma and that's all. No,
Yeah.
I can see that there's also a difference in our thinking and in our brains.
And so would you not agree that there's maybe different kinds, let's say, that there's maybe 2 ways that ADD can show up in a life? Maybe there is, one path that's trauma based, and then there's the other that we just talked about. Do you think that's possible?
Well, it wouldn't be ADHD then. If they don't have a brain difference in the end, it would have been a misdiagnosis.
But what if the brain changed because of that event?
Yeah, I don't know. Hard to say.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road because it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking out loud because that's really interesting to
I do think there's a lot of unknown in ADHD, right? There's no concrete agreement in the scientific community of what's exactly happening and what exactly it means and how exactly it occurs. So there is room for we don't fully know everything yet. But we do know it's very, very hereditary, which tells me there's something genetic there.
So you don't think it's possible to completely get rid of it?
No, I think it's a brain difference that is foundational. But I also think it's a difference, not a disability. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's just that we live in a culture where everyone's like, hey, you should be like this, and we're not. No. So that's the problem. The problem isn't the brain itself. The brain we have is obviously there for a reason. There's something beneficial about it, or we would have evolved to it evolved out of the bloodlines, right? Or the DNA. So I think there's benefits to it. I contribute something different because of my brain, right, to the world. If we all thought the same and we all functioned the same, it's like a homogenous insights and everyone has the same ideas, well, then what good is that?
Yeah. Yeah, what was interesting to me, because in the beginning, just what you said, I can do stuff differently, you can do stuff better, let's just focus on that, right? Like you can get trapped in that. I think it's quite dangerous to just stay there, right? Because then you don't work on the negatives, right? Like you don't work on your fight or flight. Like how crucial do you think that is, like to get that kind of, I think regulated in a sense that you're aware, okay, this can be a problem, right? If I always push, because that used to be me, right? I would always go 100%, 150% on stuff, right? And until I get it, I would push and then crash. But maybe also physically, right?
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts on this?
I think it's the only thing anyone should be working on. Everything else is like an umbrella in a hurricane. Like it's not going to help to the degree of energy you're putting into it. If someone is struggling with ADHD, I believe they should work on regulation. Give yourself a year to just focus on that and really learn and practice and implement and grapple with it and observe and get a new perspective and see it a different way, and then see how that affects your symptoms instead of going to I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm struggling. It's not working for me. I'm just going to keep getting calendars and timers and tools and strategies to try to keep myself afloat. It's kind of the difference between keeping your head above water and getting out of the damn water onto land and being like, oh, I'm good. Now what do I do from here? So regulation is everything, because my strengths only have come out to the degree they've come out once I've been regulated. Yeah, I was getting by. I was externally successful in life. I did have 4 careers by 30, but other than that, I was successful in all of them. I had, 3 university degrees. I've moved overseas and modeled. I've done many, many things, but it was miserable. I was not happy and I was struggling, and it really felt the whole time. I was just keeping my head above water. And I did reach a point of I want to actually enjoy my life. That's just as important as being successful and productive and getting stuff done. So how am I going to do that? And that's why I love regulation work, because you get to be more productive and enjoy your life more. Win-win.
Especially with kids, we start thinking about that stuff, right? Like what's our purpose here? What do we want to leave this world and with, and not just money and the monetary side of things. Like that side of success is interesting and important, but it's just not everything, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the tools and basic habits and stuff that people could look at if we talk about more practical side of things?
Totally. So when we talk about regulation, people typically think of exercise, yoga, meditation, tasks, doing something. The type of work that I do, there's obviously many, many layers, so I don't have time to go through the whole process here. But to begin, One would be, we need to identify dysregulation in ourselves very, very specifically, not just going, oh, I'm dysregulated. How do you know that? So signs of dysregulation, I do have a free guide if anyone wants to grab it, and this is written out so they can get that. But signs of dysregulation would be any physical signs of anxiety, so heart racing, stomach in knots, tense muscles, even headaches sometimes can be signs. My working memory isn't great, so I'm going to think on this. Like the mental signs of rumination, overwhelm, paralysis, moving physically, rushing, mental rushing, right? The thoughts are just, all of that are signs of dysregulation. So what we want to do is pick out the few that are really pertinent to you. For me, it would have been in my past physically rushing, like I'd move very quickly, running everywhere when I was moving, or else I was flat out on the couch for a day. And overwhelm, those would have been my big two. So if I was doing this work from scratch, I would go, okay, overwhelm and rushing. I'm going to start getting really aware in the moment when I'm overwhelmed and when I'm rushing, and understanding that that is dysregulation. That is me being in fight or flight. So when I'm running around, like I remember in university, I would run everywhere just because I was in fight or flight all the time. So had I known that at the time, I would have been, oh my gosh, look at, I'm dysregulated. Right? There's really no need for me to be rushing. I'm so impatient. Impatience is another one, that I can't walk. I have to run. So then we want to get really good at being aware of that in the moment, and then interrupt it with regulation. So I like to keep my little regulation kit super basic. Deep breath, relaxing the muscles, typically the shoulders, because lots of us have that kind of tension here. Physically slowing down and mentally being present. So it's kind of just like I would notice I'm rushing and I would go, oh, okay, walking. There's no bear chasing me, because that's what the body thinks. When we're in fight or flight, your body doesn't know the difference between, oh my gosh, I'm going to be 30 seconds late for my class, or I'm getting chased by a bear. And so it really puts us into a state of fear when it's unnecessary. And then we stay in that fight or flight. So you want to interrupt it. So if you're at your desk going, oh my gosh, I just got to get this email done really quick. Oh, I'm dysregulated. Relax, slow down. Hi, Susan. How are you today? Like that is the work, is I'm in a state of fight or flight. I'm going to practice changing my state of being in the moment. That is the most powerful regulation work. Yoga's great. Working out's great. Meditation's great. Journaling's great. But that is icing on the cake. That's not going to change your state of being. This is like working out, where you need the reps, right? You need to be interrupting yourself quite consistently, but you will get to a point where your body goes, oh, the bear must have left. I think I'm okay. Maybe I don't need to get so intensely ramped up all the time. And it does start to become our new normal, along with many other things that I do in my work with people. But that's kind of the first step, is identifying dysregulation and practicing interrupting it in the moment.
Nice. Yeah, I think for me, meditation is those reps. Like that's for me, getting reps, and just like always, drifting off and then catching myself, and then it's much easier for me to catch myself when I start, going off with my kids, or anything of that nature, because they are really pushing it. I have two sons, and the youngest is slowly starting to move. He's like 10 months old, and the older one is just like, is pushing it. And so that's when it really comes up, right? Especially in moments where I'm kind of very focused. I'm trying to be very focused. I have to work, and then he's doing some bullshit, and it's like that's my challenge, right? Probably they're also there for me to practice that. But also what I noticed is sorry about that. That screen time is hard for me these days. Like the lights. Also, the lights here from from that big light here is kind of, I don't know what it does exactly, but it makes me fidgety after a certain time. Like, do you think there's a correlation there, or do you think it's just like either sensitivity or anything of that nature?
It can be that sensitivity, right? That overstimulation. But for actual screen time, because lights would be different than screen time, I think those would be two different things. But screens and consuming content, I do think dysregulates us further, right? Because people are on we were watching movies and then we were watching TV and we had commercials and it had to be slow and you had to wait for the commercial to be over to get to the rest of your show, and you could only watch it at 7 p.m. on Sundays. I do miss those days. Although it was inconvenient, it was quite lovely. And now you can have everything all the time, and we can't even watch TikTok normally. We got to put on 2x. Rush, rush, rush. We're training our brain to be more dysregulated through those things. So I do, in the groups that I run, we talk about like an entertainment ladder of like, how can I stretch my attention span a little bit when I'm doing things that like consuming entertainment. So like TikTok 2x would be at the very bottom. That is like, my brain doesn't have to think. I don't have to put any effort into it. I don't need any attention. It just is going in. Then we have TikTok. For me, then it's Instagram, Facebook video, YouTube videos, TV, movies, reading. So it's like, if one day I'm like on TikTok 2x, I've never fallen into that trap, thank God, because it does prime your brain to then be too impatient for the normal 1-minute video speed. But maybe it's like, wow, I'm not going to use 2x today. I'm going to push myself a little bit to retrain my brain that there's no rush. I can take things slow. I'm safe, right? Because that rushing is signaling to the nervous system that we cannot talk to. It only knows behavior. It only knows action. So when we go, oh my gosh, you're such a rush, that is putting your body into fight or flight. So I very deliberately walk slow as much as I can. Like the other day, I took my mom to an appointment. I was walking around downtown. I was going to go to a coffee shop, and I was just like walking weirdly slow. But I'm like, this is so nice because there's no reason right now for me to move quickly. So I'm going to take this time to show my body, hey, we're good. Just going to slowly walk across the street. And that is an investment in my regulations. It's not always super comfortable. But then someday when you're watching TikTok, maybe you go, oh, I could actually watch a YouTube video. I'm going to stretch myself a little bit and watch a 15-minute video. And that might sound silly, but at this point, that takes attention span. Or even a movie. I know a lot of us can't watch TV or movies without also being on our phone. So maybe it's not having 2 screens at once. That could be a way you can work on moving towards a more regulated consumption, because we're not going to probably have no screens. So how could we dial it back a little bit to support our regulation?
Yeah, or black and white screens. It's also interesting. I dabbled with that a bit. Have you ever tried like, audiobooks on X2 and then reading at the same time? Have you tried that?
No, I haven't done that. No, I'm not a 2x person. I will say that. I do find it too overstimulating for me.
Yeah, I did that back in the day when it was topics that I wouldn't be interested in, but then would have to go through it.
Right. But having the audio and the visual at the same time is definitely supportive to our learning.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so interesting. So it's kind of a glass, that you're investing in. Depending on how much you invested in, it's either full or empty or in between of your regulation. Okay, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on plant medicine and psychedelics? Like, do you think?
I really have no thoughts. I've literally never even smoked weed before, so
okay, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I do know that can be a slippery slope, though. I know I have clients who are like, I can't not smoke every day because of their dysregulation, right? It regulates me. I understand that, and that can have its place and it can have its time. But when you're like, okay, this is getting compulsive, which is addictive, right? I'm addicted. I can't not do it. It's not because the substance is addictive necessarily. It's because the feeling is addictive, right? It's like, oh, I'm dysregulated and that regulates me. So the whole point of my work with people is we want to be able to regulate without anything. I want to be able to regulate without going on my phone and scrolling. I want to be able to regulate without spending. I want to be able to regulate without substances, because that's when we hold, all the power. Is when, oh, I can regulate myself. I just need me and I'm good. That's true freedom. And then you can choose to enjoy your substances. You can choose to scroll. You can choose to watch TV. You can choose to spend your money in ways that are enjoyable without it being compulsive. And that's really what regulation work is about, freedom. I have the freedom of choice. My behavior isn't dictated by the fact that I'm in fight or flight.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what about supplements? Do you like tyrosine and stuff like that?
No, I don't.
Have you tested?
No, I do come from, the wellness space when I was dieting and in my like healthy era. And so I'm quite skeptical. I'm like, I think a lot of stuff's bullshit. So the mental work, the mindset work to me has always been the most powerful thing. So I don't really Like the other stuff maybe is icing on the cake, but I don't think that there's anything that's going to be as powerful as getting yourself out of fight or flight. So I don't really worry about it.
So what's basically the move of you like think about these topics on a daily basis? Was it like, you know, therapy for yourself basically? Because like to me, the work that I do now to big extent was that in a sense, right? Like just working through these topics and in the end you're an expert, right? Like on that path, right? Was that similar with you or?
I do have a very, I don't know if it was curious, but when I hit a wall of like, I can't do this anymore, I do just tend to figure stuff out. Like that's how I did with my eating stuff. Like when I woke up one day and I was like, oh my God, like, I cannot do this anymore. I'm always hungry. I wake up thinking about food. I go to bed thinking about food. This has taken over my life. This is not a life I want to live. So from that day, I was just like, hey, what am I going to do then? I think I'm just going to have to eat. And I just took the restrictions off, let myself eat. And then like after like 6 months of doing that, then I found out about the concept of intuitive eating, which I had already been doing because it's intuitive, right? It's like, oh, just like eat when I'm hungry, eat what I want. Don't eat to be as skinny as possible. Let myself live. Oh, what a concept. Like move your body to feel good and to be strong, not to be skinny and all that stuff. And so I went down that road and I learned about intuitive eating as a concept. And then I was like, oh, yes, this is the answer because I have found freedom. I went from binge eating for 10 years to never binge. It's been like 12 years probably now. I've never binge. You couldn't pay me to binge. Like I literally physically don't have the ability anymore because I got out of fight or flight with food. And so I didn't have the language for that at the time. But then I was in my master's degree to become a therapist. And I was thinking, oh, I'll do eating disorders. That's what I'm going to do when I get out of school. And then I was diagnosed with ADHD while in my master's program. And I went, oh God, that makes everything make so much more sense. And then I became interested in that. And the food thing was getting a little old for me because I had repaired my relationship with food so long ago that I wasn't as passionate about it because I was kind of over it and like food was no problem for me anymore. So of course I love to help people, but it just wasn't personally a thing I was that invested in. So then when ADHD came along, I was invested in that and really interested in it. So I started just the typical way of I took some courses and that really shows me people do not know what to do with ADHDers because it was like, give them timers, give them tools, give them strategies, external supports. So to me, that shows that like professionals think there's nothing we can do about you internally. We just have to support you externally. Maybe a little CBT with some worksheets, but other than that, that's what we have to offer. And so I did that and I started with that. And then people would come back to their next sessions having not done any of it because whoever said, let's give homework to people who are overwhelmed is insane. That's not going to work. So then I just started seeing this trend of like, wow, every single person I talk to is in this cycle of frantic crash. And that's the cycle I was in. I thought I was bipolar for a while because of that intense high-low. And that's not something talked about with ADHD very much. I think that should be one of the first symptoms we talk about. It's like, are you in a cycle of this kind of high, frantic fight or flight and crash and going round and round? And every single person I talked to was. I went, well, that's very interesting. And then I looked into, then I started researching fight or flight and all that stuff separate from ADHD. There's not tons out there about ADHDers in fight or flight. So I kind of brought the connection of the cycle with being in fight or flight, with the ADHD brain, with weight. And then I was working on it. And then I was like, oh my God, my symptoms are going way down that I was labeling ADHD, but maybe it was me being in fight or flight. And anyways, it has developed over the past 2 years to the point it is now. But it's more of like a connecting the dots than like, I didn't read a book and learn this. I read many different resources and connected the ideas like at a connection point.
Yeah, but that's what it's all about, right? Like it's our own perception, our own path, and then you basically put all your learnings together.
Totally.
That's all it is. Yeah. So binge eating is basically an addiction to food, right? Technically.
For me, it was because I was restricting. Yeah, if you eat broccoli and chicken all week, your body's going to go, F this. I'm going to eat everything in sight. You're starving me, which is putting your body in fight or flight, right? I was never eating enough, and that was putting my body into fight or flight. There's another thing that can trigger that because my body's always like, oh my God, I'm hungry. Where's the food? Where's the food? And you do reach a point where, F it, I'll just eat everything, go buy 3 bags of chips, go in my room, eat them all. It was bad. It was really rough. I was very unhappy. But yeah, it's so cool when you get out of fight or flight. Like my digestion improved. I was like, do I have some sort of digestive issue for 10 years because of that? So like when you get out of fight or flight, your digestion improves, your physical aches and pains improve, mental clarity improves. So many things get better. I just first experienced it with my relationship with food.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm thinking like simultaneously, about where the connection is to that whole spiritual realm. Because there is one. Because I see these parallels because there's a lot of addiction going on. Addiction to me is a spiritual void, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why is that connection there? I will have a think about that even more because it's super interesting to me now. Because obviously you said, okay, the like I come from a family of doctors and medicine and I was lucky because we always had like different approaches, right? Like that's how I grew up. Okay, there's the antibiotic, but there's also homeopathy, right? Like that was always my perception of things, right? There's not just this one route. And then these normal doctors, right, these psychotherapists, all they do is give external tools, right? They give you the pill. I understand, okay, in the States it's probably also monetary incentive, like that's way more than in Europe. But like, why do you think that is? Like, especially these people that spend so much time with other humans that are struggling, why is there no thought processes around there that it's just that one way? Let's just stay there and let's just give them pills, and we're not solving anything. We're just treating the symptom and just slapping them across the head each time, and it's actually getting worse, I would argue, because it's speed in the end. And like, have you thought about that?
Well, I definitely think medication is a godsend for some and useless for others, and it doesn't mean anything. I know some people think like, oh, if it didn't work wonders for me, it means I don't have ADHD. That's not the case for sure. But I mean, if doctors are taught, hey, there's nothing you can do about the ADHD brain, it is what it is, all you can do is support them, they're going to do that. It's just like when I was in intuitive eating and anti-diet stuff, why do doctors just say lose weight, lose weight, lose weight, restrict yourself, lose weight, lose weight, lose weight? Like, that's not working. Like 80% of diets end up in us gaining more weight than we lost in the first place. Like, but we still do it. It's like if you don't have an alternative, people are just going to do what they know. And if they're not invested enough to find an alternative, they're just going to do what they know. Especially, a doctor obviously has a little bit more restriction than I do. Like I can make connections and go, hey, here's my theory. Let's do it, people. And people can say, okay, right? When you're a doctor, you can't just like have a theory and do it. You're much more restricted. So I do think there is a element of when you're in a more regulated field, which obviously in medical doctor is more regulated than a counselor that's just talking to somebody. You are restricted by what we know for sure, right? And we know for sure that we can provide medication and these tools and strategies.
Yeah, but do we really like
right?
Can't there's treatments for
from what's out there, right? The studies show this is helpful. Okay, well now I'm allowed to, because a peer-reviewed study was done, I'm allowed to do this thing.
Exactly.
And I do hope to get the this work around fight or flight and ADHD. That'll be my next endeavor, is getting studies done on, okay, well, what happens to the ADHD symptoms in the ADHD brain when we just focus on regulation and getting out of fight or flight? And then, studying, okay, so is actually what we've called ADHD two different things? Because I believe that's true. So then if we have that information, that may change what people can do about it. But it's not, there's nothing solid out there going, here's what we have found. And that does restrict the modern work.
Yeah. Have you thought about family constellation work? Like, has that crossed your path?
No.
Yeah, look into that. That's interesting, especially when you want to do your studies. Because that kind of interlinks. I know it's a bit more of the spiritual side of things, maybe, right? But like it's very much okay if I'm fixing something, on a let's say, son and daughter level, it also changes something with the parents and vice versa, right?
Sure.
And especially with fight or flight, I think that's a very interesting topic there, because like I think it is interlinked, because I can only think like about my path and stuff, and I know, okay, there's stuff that happened with my mother, and also before I was born, and maybe there's a connection there, right? And so that's interesting routes to take for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because if the ADHD brain difference is hereditary, which we know it is, then our parents who had ADHD were also in fight or flight, because every ADHDer is in fight or flight unless they work on it. So
exactly.
I definitely have a parent with ADHD that's been in fight or flight their whole life, and it's like,
well, there you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's the connection. And from your experience with all the clients that you work with, because I'm very much interested in the addiction topics, of course, right? Like what are the the top 5 that you would see that are linked? We talked about weed. What else do you see?
Spending and scrolling, I think, would be
really?
They're not chemically addictive, but they are experientially addictive. Especially scrolling. If I could prescribe one thing to every ADHD, it would be to not have a smartphone, but that's not very realistic. I have a smartphone, but I do have a dumb phone coming, and my smartphone is only going to be for work, because most of my business does come from social media.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have it for work, I would not have it personally. I don't have it personally, but I would not be on it, because I don't think it's helping.
Okay, so spending, scrolling.
Yeah.
Weed. What else?
Alcohol, I'm sure. People aren't as open about that, but I'm sure
is that not a question you ask them, like, straight up front?
No, because I work mostly in groups, so I don't require anyone to share anything personal.
It's like gun to the head.
Yeah.
What are you using?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we talk about it as a whole.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a benefit to group work in that perspective?
Yeah, people love it. Even if they're skeptical coming in, it's like, oh, I actually loved being in a group, of 10 or 15 other people, adults with ADHD, who are all saying the exact same thing I'm feeling. Oh, I'm not weird. Like, this is actually super predictable. This is what the ADHD brain does. This isn't a personal failing. And there's a lot of connections that are made even between the group members that you just cannot recreate on one-on-one.
I don't know why I was never the group type for anything. My biggest leaps forward was always one-on-one work.
Yeah, and that has its place, but
just
I do think people really, in the end, are like, oh, I actually loved that part of it, of the process of being with others and seeing how others were implementing it or hearing others' questions.
Yeah, I actually think, like, for me, one of the biggest factors is sleep. I especially now these last couple months with the baby, I've been testing it, because I've just been very aware, like, okay, how often am I awake during the night? How much time do I sleep in total? What's my deep sleep? I don't wear the Oura ring or anything like that, but I'm just guessing here maybe, but sleep is a big one. And then surely, because like usually I don't drink, a caffeine like right away when I wake up. And then the earlier I drink it, the closer to waking up, of course, the crash is like bigger and earlier in the day. But I mean, everyone talks about like all these fancy things with anything first, right? But I always say, okay, why don't you fix like the basics first, right? Like nutrition, sleep, like all that kind of stuff.
But I get that that's almost impossible if you're in fight or flight. This is the thing. This is the trouble, right? If you're in fight or flight, that means survival mode. That means I'm just trying not to die. I do not have the bandwidth or energy to better myself. I'm just trying to survive, literally. And it might not be literally, but internally it's literally, right? The nervous system is in that state. So I was definitely at a place, like when I had young kids and my ADHD was the worst it had been, and my fight or flight was the most intense it had been. I remember my mom being like, you guys should really create a will. I'm like, if you ask me one more thing, I cannot handle anything. It's not that I don't have the time. I'm just so overwhelmed, and I'm in such a place of survival that I cannot do anything. So I can't worry about how much I'm sleeping. I'm just trying not to die. I can't worry about eating well. If I eat a bag of chips, I'm winning because I'm not starving. Like, that's what's so tricky. That's why I urge people to work on the state of being first, because if you're in fight or flight constantly, very hard to implement changes, very hard to better yourself, very hard to do anything that takes effort on top of survival. And I've definitely seen that. Like, the thing I joke about is like, I know when I'm flossing, I'm really regulated, right? Because it's like when I'm dysregulated, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. I don't have time for this. I'm so overwhelmed. I will cut everything I possibly can. But at this phase in my life, like I'm working out regularly. I'm eating meals regularly. I'm eating, nourishing meals regularly. I'm taking the time even to like go get lunch in the middle of the day, of like go get a healthy lunch instead of just like scrounging in the fridge. Like that's an investment in myself that I can't make that investment when I'm in fight or flight. I don't have the bandwidth and I just don't care enough because I'm just trying to survive. So that's why it's really, people can give themselves a break. If you're in fight or flight and you're like, oh, if I could just meditate and get my sleep in order and eat good, then everything would be fine. Okay, but there's a huge barrier there if you're in fight or flight. So let's just get you out of fight or flight first. Then you will find caring about sleep and eating is going to come much more naturally and much more easily because you're not in survival mode. And you'll actually want to do it. That's what's so beautiful and stuff. Like, I really should. It's like, eating real meals would feel great. Like for a while there, I was eating chips for lunch. Like it's like, I'm so busy. I got so much to do. And I'm like, I feel like shit. So it's like, I genuinely want to eat good food. I genuinely want to work out. I genuinely want to, prioritize feeling good. And I don't drink at all anymore. I never was a big drinker, but even having a glass of wine would make me feel shitty. And then, so it's like when I became more regulated, I was like, really took me a while, but first I was like, I'm local sober. I'm not going to drink unless I'm on vacation. Then I went on vacation, had one glass of champagne. I'm like, I feel like shit. I think I'm just going full on, like no drinking for me. But I wouldn't have been able to come to that if I was in fight or flight because I wouldn't care about feeling my best. I just care about surviving. So just to kind of give people some context of like why change might feel inaccessible right now. It's because that change needs to be the state of being first. Then we can change behaviors and habits and things like that much more easily.
Yeah, I've been messing with intermittent fasting. Like for me, I think that works pretty well, especially to have that morning to think. And sugar. I mean, like you probably tested with that too. Like I think that's a big one.
I eat quite free, especially coming from intuitive eating. I have no restrictions on what I eat, but I do find as a more regulated person who wants to feel good, I do go to quite nourishing stuff. But
So
I'm allowed to eat whatever I want. I have no rules.
Yeah, I eat everything as well. But I'm just saying, like, if I would, put like 4 cubes of sugar in my first coffee in the morning, like, there's no way I will be able to concentrate as well as without putting it in.
Right. But I think what's so cool is like working on the function of that. Now, like I really shouldn't eat sugar because that's how we get into these like shoulds, and that's a whole thing with dysregulation as well as rules and shoulds, and it's very dysregulating.
No, and I'm not that person anyways. Like I think if there's balance, that there's balance, and especially with food, like just cutting everything. Like I mean, I don't eat shit food. I've never done that. Never had that problem, luckily. But so you wrote a book now. What is that about?
It's not out yet, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to be talking too much about it. But it'll be out in 2026, and it's just my whole approach, front to back.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were already through it with the process. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's the manuscript's handed in. It's going into editing now and everything. But yeah, publishing is a long road.
Okay, nice. Cool. So where can people find you if they want to work with you?
They can find me on Instagram at ADHD with Jenna Free, TikTok, because I know you guys are there, on there already, ADHD with Jenna Free. And I run groups, my ADHD groups, the next one opening end of April. And that's ADHDwithJennaFree.com/groups if you want more information about that. I also have a podcast coming out April 14th, ADHD with Jenna Free.
Nice.
And where I just yammer about this stuff every week.
Okay, excellent. Very well. Cool. Thanks a lot for your time. That was good.
Thank you so much.
And I'll see you around.
Amazing.